Think it's physically possible to have chosen a better sweater on Christmas than one that says I don't compete, I dominate? I don't fucking think so. I don't think it gets any fucking better than that at all, actually. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is what determines an exercise's muscle building value. Not an exercise's value, an exercise's muscle building value. Because if you're going to be tested on an exercise, like a football player going into the NFL Combine, and they're going to be tested on their bench press performance, that will determine the value of that exercise. It's going to be very valuable to them because they're being tested on it. However, if your goal is to build muscle, there's a different set of criteria that will determine a muscle's an exercise's muscle building value, and it is path and alignment and range of motion. Does the exercise duplicate the function of the muscle against resistance? Does the resistance directly oppose the function of the muscle being trained? And as for range of motion, does the exercise subject the muscle to high levels of tension in its longest, shortest, and mid-range position? So I'll give you an example with the bench press. A lot of people love the bench press. They'll say it's the best exercise that you could do to build the chest. Does it adhere to this criteria? Yes or no? The pec's function is to bring the arm across the front of the body. With the bench press, resistance is going this way. Does the pec fight the resistance and duplicate its function when doing so? Yes, it does. Does it train the pec through a full range of motion? Well, since the pec can produce tension to go all the way across the body like this, the answer is no. So the bench press's value in terms of building the chest is not maximum. It is an incomplete movement when defined by this criteria because it doesn't subject the pec to high levels of tension in its shortest range. Therefore, your strategy to build the pec should include exercises that subject the pec to high levels of tension in its shortest range, or your development will be suboptimal at best. Now, there's one other factor to take into consideration, and that is the human element. So the X factor here is that if the individual cannot recruit the muscle, all this mechanical bullshit doesn't fucking matter at all. An exercise could be very mechanically sound. The resistance could be in direct opposition of the muscle's function through a full range of motion. But if the individual can't recruit the muscle being trained, then it doesn't fucking matter. So the value of that exercise from a muscle building perspective is going to be significantly lower. And that individual is going to want to include in their strategy ways to overcome that issue so that they can increase the value of all the other exercises that they're doing, because it'll go up by default. If you're using the muscle and you can recruit it, then all this mechanical shit matters more. But all this mechanical shit doesn't fucking matter if you can't recruit the muscle that you're trying to recruit. Another factor to take into consideration would be at what cost, right? So with the bench press, a lot of people injure their shoulders on the bench press, especially in the bottom position, because the shoulder is slightly hyperextended depending on how low you go. And when you go really, really low with very high loads, the risk is higher. So at what cost are you performing an exercise? So that's the criteria that you should use to determine an exercise's muscle building value. It's very simple. Does the exercise duplicate the muscle's function against resistance? And does it subject the muscle to high levels of tension through a full range of motion? If the answer is yes, then that's going to be a valuable exercise from a muscle building perspective. If the answer is no to either of those questions, or it's just not what it needs to be, then the exercise might be incomplete, and your strategy is therefore incomplete if you don't include other exercises to overcome what that exercise lacks. If you like the information, feel free to share. Click the fucking button at the bottom, subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep bringing it. I bring it every fucking day, even on Christmas, and I don't compete, I fucking dominate.